The Minister of Energy and Electricity, Kgosientsho Ramogkopa, has announced a new nuclear energy plan. So my question is, we've moved from asifuni nuclear to imnandi nuclear. For those who don't speak Zulu, that means we've moved from we don't want nuclear to nuclear is delicious. I mean, what's going on? What's going on here? We're going to dissect this in today's episode. The cabinet has been announced, as you know, and some ministers have started making announcements about what is their agenda moving forward. We saw the Minister of Public Works saying that there's going to be a freeze on accommodation, there's going to be a freeze on furniture purchases for ministers. And I did a video on that. We've seen the Education Minister talking about looking into curriculum reform. We've seen her talking about, dealing with pit toilets, which still exist in some schools. I'm going to do a deep dive into education. Look out for that episode. And today we've seen an article in the Sunday Times talking about that the government of national unity has doubled down on its nuclear plan and aims to secure approval from the treasury by next month for a 2,500 megawatt power plant. So what it's saying here is that the minister has spoken to the Sunday Times that his team is working on a deal to finalize the procurement structure of a new build project. And he said that the work was at an advanced stage. In January earlier this year, the government announced plans through the then Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to implement a new nuclear build initiative, which it billed as a strategic national project to ensure security of energy supply and to contribute to the government's economic reconstruction and recovery plan. Right? So what the minister then said around this particular matter is the following. There's the latest nuclear technology that is very rapid to deploy, which is relatively cheaper and more efficient. We must resolve the issues of who will operate the plant, but I think I can say before we even conclude that it will be Eskom, as Eskom has the experience having done that at the Koeberg, he said. Right? The new build will be larger than Koeberg, South Africa's only nuclear power plant so far, which generates 1,940 megawatts. So generation of 2,500 megawatts equates to 2.5 stages of load shedding, right? So we know, of course, that Ramogkopa was appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa in March last year to oversee electricity generation, and his portfolio was expanded in the last week to include energy. He will now deal with independent power producers and has already taken over the work to procure 2,500 megawatts of nuclear power. Key questions for me. Will this be a private-public partnership? I'm going to explain a public-private partnership just now, and I'm also going to explain build, transfer, operate. Second question, will it be a transparent process? Many ministries, and this is why this question matters to me, many ministries have moved into the cabinet, right? Electricity and energy, not into the cabinet, into the presidency. Many ministries have moved into the presidency. Electricity and energy was moved into the presidency, right? State-owned enterprises also now is in the presidency. That's the ministry that Pravin Gordhan used to be over. Now, the president is directly overseeing that. State intelligence is in the presidency. Those are three key ministries which are now sitting within the presidency. One of the big issues that people used to complain about was lack of transparency and accountability under Zuma. It seems to me that it's unclear how the cabinet and also how the members of parliament and the public will have a line of sight into decisions that are being made around electricity and energy and state-owned enterprises when they are within the presidency, and the president doesn't do interviews. He doesn't take questions from journalists. He doesn't take, doesn't do press briefings. So how are people going to actually know what's happening and hold him to account for some of the decisions which are being made there? So that question, will it be a transparent process? It's also going to matter for later. Remember it. Another question which is big for me is what has changed since 2017, right? And number 4, will this nuclear energy be distributed by the energy Exchange of Southern Africa. The Energy Exchange of Southern Africa is owned by Mr. Rupert through his entities, right, where he has large shareholdings. So the Energy Exchange of Southern Africa is a supplier of grid-connected renewable energy to Southern African corporates, industrials, and SMEs, right? They have a NERSA trading license, and it is owned by Remgro and Rand Merchant Holdings. Those are their majority shareholders. And those two entities are entities which Mr. Rupert has shares in. So is this something to keep in mind as we go into further discussion? So let's go into some key concepts which are important to know and understand. What is a public-private partnership? A public-private partnership in tenders refers to a cooperative arrangement between a government entity and a private sector company for the purpose of financing, designing, implementing, and operating projects and services that were traditionally provided by the public sector. These projects can include infrastructure developments such as roads, bridges, hospitals, and schools, as well as public services like waste management and water supply. Key features of public-private partnerships in tenders include long-term collaboration, risk sharing, funding, efficiency and innovation, and performance-based payments. Long-term collaboration. PPPs typically involve long-term agreements, which often span 20-30 years, during which the private partner is responsible for delivering the project or service, right? Risk sharing. Risks associated with the project are distributed between the public and private partners based on their ability to manage them. Common risks include financial, construction, operational, and market risks. Funding. The private sector often provides significant portions of the funding, reducing the immediate financial burden on the public sector. In return, the private partner can earn revenues through various means, such as user fees, government payments, or a combination of both. Efficiency and innovation. PPPs aim to leverage the private sector expertise, efficiency, and innovation to deliver public projects and services more efficiently than traditional public procurement methods. Performance-based payments. Payments to the private partner are usually linked to performance metrics, ensuring that the project meets predefined standards and objectives. Now, I want to make a quick comment on this concept that I've just explained to you. Number one is that in South Africa, the funding has typically not been provided by the private sector. They've actually tried to get the funding from government to do the projects and then deliver the service. So if you think about the SAA deal that Pravin Gordhan basically could not pull off, the funding for the SAA deal did not come from Takatso. It was coming from the South African government. So they were trying to say, look, we can do this privatization deal with these guys, etc., etc. And then they were still providing the funding. Who is funding IPPs? A lot of money has been taken from the international community based on loans taken by the South African government, which then get given to the IPP companies so that they can provide electricity and make money from Eskom. So the idea that, you get a benefit from the private sector sharing the financial risk in the South African model has not proven to be true, because these guys have just become middlemen who came in and said, we can do it better than the government, but the government must take all of the financial risk and we will take all of the profits. And then when we're done, you guys can take back the asset, which we've just made a lot of profit off, which you took the loan off, which the South African taxpayers paid for. Do you see the game? Also, performance-based payments. The payments which are being made for IPPs right now are not performance-based, right? IPPs cost a lot of money to Eskom. If you look at the energy generated by IPPs versus the amount of money that they were paid for by Eskom, when it comes to the Eskom financial reports, you'll see that IPPs generated 15% of the energy, but they got a large share of the money that was spent by Eskom for energy generation. I think 15% versus 41%, if I'm not mistaken. That can't work. That can't be something that we think is a model that particularly works. Going on to explain the second concept, build, transfer, operate. Build, transfer, operate, which is often abbreviated to BTO, is a type of public-private partnership, right? Model where a private entity is granted a concession to finance, design, construct, and operate a project for a specific period, right? Here is a detailed breakdown of the BTO model and how it works. Key features, right? Under the build, the private sector partner is responsible for the design, financing, and construction of the infrastructure or facility. We already spoke about financing and how that doesn't always happen. This includes all activities required to complete the project to the agreed specifications and standard. Transfer. Upon the completion of the construction, the ownership of the infrastructure or facility is transferred to the public sector. This transfer often occurs without any payment, as the construction costs are recovered through the operation phase. Operate. After the transfer, the private sector partner continues to operate and maintain the facility for a predetermined period, usually to recoup their investment and earn a return. During this phase, the private partner generates revenue, often through user fees, tariffs, or government payments. So this is a build, transfer, operate model. If you recall, what the minister said is that we are going to sort out, right? We're going to sort out who is actually going to be the operator. Remember what he said? Let me go back to that quote. There's the latest nuclear technology that is very rapid to deploy, relatively cheaper and more efficient. We must resolve the issues of who will operate the plant. That is key. That is key. Who is going to build? Who is going to operate? Those are key questions that we must watch out for moving forward, because we have been here before. We have been here before, which takes me to the question that I wanted to ask earlier, right? Which is, what has changed since 2017, right? Do you remember the background? And I went and I looked at some of the stuff just to make sure I can give you accurate information about the background of this matter. In 2013, the Minister of Energy, acting in terms of Section 34 of the Energy Regulation Act, determined that South Africa required 9.6 gigawatts of nuclear power and that this would be procured by the Department of Energy. This was done in concurrence with NERSA, which is the energy regulator of South Africa. The minister, right, made that determination in December of 2013, but it was gazetted in 2015. The gazetting and production of this Section 34 determination created litigation. It created litigation, which then led to certain entities that nobody had heard of saying that they were opposed to this. Okay? Right. 2015. On the 10th of June 2015, the minister tabled 3 intergovernmental agreements before Parliament. In chronological order, these were the agreements. The agreement between the Republic of South Africa and the United States of America. This agreement was tabled in 1995. The agreement between the Republic of South Africa and the government of Korea, which was concluded in 2010. And then controversially, this is the one that created all of the drama. The deal between the government of South Africa and the government of the Russian Federation, which was concluded in September of 2014, all in regard to cooperation in the field of nuclear energy. In 2016, a different minister this time issued a second Section 34 determination along similar lines to the previous Section 34 determination, but now identifying Eskom as the procurer of the nuclear plants. This determination was made public and gazetted in December of 2016. Are you following? Right. Then there was a court case in 2017. Earthlife Africa and the South African Faith Communities Environment Institute took this nuclear deal matter to the Western Cape High Court. The legal teams for the civic organizations argued that the government's decision to expand the nuclear program by 9,600 megawatts was unlawful. They also argued that the decision by Minister Tina Joemat-Pettersson to table the agreements with Russian, Korean, and US in a manner which ensured that it did not come before Parliament was unconstitutional. In public, they were holding protests when these court cases were happening, and this was what was said. Some old clips that I was able to find, the Isifuni nuclear clips. Here you go, listen.
Find out what the protest action was all about outside. Well, it still has to do with the nuclear. It just grown since the early hours of this morning, where there were just a few people, but it now has grown to quite a crowd. But we've actually pulled somebody inside the parliamentary precinct to talk to us about what it is that they are protesting against. Obviously, we do know it's got to do with that proposed nuclear deal, but they're very much so against this. Roger is joining us, Roger Domingo. Roger, who are you representing?
Well, I'm from an organization called the Southern Cape Land Committee. We work in the Eastern Cape and Western Cape, and we're really here to say no to the nuclear deal.
Okay. I know that you are here in support of the Southern African Faith Communities Environment Institute, because they're spearheading this. In fact, they're heading to the High Court together with the Right to Know and Earthlife Africa Johannesburg. The procedure for today, what's going to happen?
Well, we will be marching from Parliament to the High Court, and then we will be there for the case. We will get regular updates outside, but it's really just to be here in support and solidarity to say no to the nuclear deal. We feel that it will impact South Africans, ordinary South Africans, in a very negative way. The budget required, we believe it's unaffordable to South Africa, so everything will be impacted.
What are your concerns? I mean, we talk about a nuclear deal, a proposed nuclear deal. I know the budget that's being quoted is around about 1 trillion rand, and that's what you're worried about.
Yeah, it's proposed at 1 trillion rand, but it's likely, if this thing goes ahead, and it's likely that it will be more. Our concerns is really that this deal has taken place behind closed doors. It's a secret deal. The South Africans at large have not been involved. There hasn't been proper consultation. So that's the first thing we are opposing. And then secondly, we believe that it's just unaffordable to the country, and that will impact negatively on everything from social grants to ongoing development in the country. We just believe it will not be good.
Yeah. I know that you also highlight the fact that there'll be minimal job creation through all of this. And you also talk about the fact that there'll be an increase on electricity prices, whereas they're trying to sell it to us that electricity will go down with nuclear.
Yeah, look, nuclear energy is part of the energy mix in South Africa. But we really think that the way to go is renewable energy, not nuclear. We think that renewable energy is cost effective, and that's been proven the world over.
Leave it there, Roger. Thanks for popping in to chat to us. So that's what's happening outside of Parliament at the moment. And you can see that people coming to voice their opinions and hoping that the budget certainly will address some of these concerns. But I still think the nuclear deal is going to have a big question mark over it. And that's what many of our guests were talking about, the fact that are the Treasury and the presidency on the same page? And
of course, the one solution that's been mooted is nuclear energy. But the protesters outside Parliament this morning will have none of it. They're hoping to sway the finance minister into making sure that there is no announcement on any nuclear deals of any sort. Let's speak to them now. Very good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Yes, we actually stand here every Wednesday to show the cabinet as they come in for their meeting that nuclear energy is not the future of South Africa. Even if you were to start building nuclear energy power plants and agree on it tomorrow, where would we get the money? We don't have money to provide school books. We don't have money to provide education. Where would we find this money? And a nuclear power plant takes 10, 12, 15 years to build. So it's not going to solve our energy crisis. If we want to look at solving the energy crisis, what we believe we need to do is focus on renewable energy. The other issue around this nuclear deal is that it's secret. And we believe that what we're looking at is a high risk of corruption, another arms deal in the making, 1 trillion rand. And what has been recently released, of course, is that the Russians had signed a deal with South Africa, which nobody knew about, where South Africa will take all the risks of nuclear power and the Russians will take the benefits, because we will continue to pay them for more than 20 years.
And what do you think of one school of thought that suggests that nuclear energy is used the world over now and that its merits far outweigh its disadvantages and that it is the way of the future?
Well, I don't know where that report comes from, because the World Nuclear Status Report, which is produced every year and looks at nuclear power stations around the world, says that over the last years, more power stations have gone offline than have been put on the grid, and that those that are being built are behind time and over budget.
And that South Africa, prior to this democratic dispensation, had nuclear facilities that were functioning pretty well, and that this perhaps is just a resurgence thereof.
Well, our nuclear facilities were used to make bombs in the apartheid era, and I don't think we want to go that route. And our nuclear power station is now beyond its sell-by date. Needs to be closed down rather than rejuvenated. We have one of the highest solar radiation in the world. Let's use it.
But Liz, what is your biggest fear?
Well, I think our biggest fear is because we're a faith-based organization. So we focus and try and raise the voices of those that are poor and vulnerable. And our biggest fear is that going into the future, there will not be energy for those vulnerable and poor people. And that's what we're really standing here for. And we ask all South Africans to join us.
Now, I'm doing things a little bit backwards today because I haven't defined who us is. So perhaps you can just quickly introduce yourself and the name of your organization.
Sure. I'm Liz McDade from the Southern African Faith Communities Environment Institute, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's basically an organization that works with many faiths, Christian, Jewish, Baha'i, Hindu, Muslim, all over the Southern African region. And we are focused on environmental issues because we believe that all faith communities have sacred texts which focus on treading lightly on the planet and looking after the resource. It's the only planet we have. And we don't believe that nuclear energy is part of our future.
The courts actually blocked this nuclear deal. The Western Cape High Court blocked this nuclear deal. And this was the court's reasoning. The court said that the Constitution provided that everyone had the right to administrative action that was lawful, reasonable, and procedurally fair. They said that when former energy ministers Ben Martin and Tina Joemat-Patterson had taken decisions in 2013 and 2016 respectively that South Africa would procure 9,600 megawatts of new nuclear power, the National Energy Regulator of South Africa was legally bound to consider the minister's proposed decisions. Only if NERSA concurred with the decision did it become lawful and binding. NERSA had concurred with the minister's decision in both instances and they were gazetted. However, what the court said was that the short period between the two ministers asking NERSA to concur with their decisions made it most unlikely that a fair procedure could have been carried out. It's very speculative from the court, but that's what they said. Judge Bozalek said, there is no serious dispute that the decision to procure 9,600 megawatts of new nuclear power will have far-reaching consequences for the South African public and will entail very substantial spending. The applicants estimate the cost which will be ultimately be met by the public through taxes and increased electricity charges could be 1 trillion rand. And this estimate was not disputed by the respondents. This huge cost allocated to nuclear power would inevitably affect spending on other government programs such as health and education. The nuclear program would also have potentially far-reaching implications for the environment. Because of these considerations, the court said, if NERSA had carried out a rational and fair decision-making process, it would have made provision for the public to submit its views before concurring with the minister's proposed nuclear decision. It did not do so. NERSA's decision was therefore procedurally unfair and breached the promotion of the Administrative Justice Act. In addition, NERSA was under a statutory duty to act in the public interest and in a transparent manner. What they said was NERSA has failed to explain how it acted in the public interest without taking steps to ascertain the view of the public, the judgment read. For these reasons, decisions failed the test for rational decision-making and the decision for new nuclear power was set aside. Now, it seems that there were two big elements to the court decision. One, lack of public consultation. Two, almost imposition by the ministers on NERSA by giving a short turnaround time for decision-making, lack of transparency, lack of public engagement and accountability. And the other one was the costing. 1 trillion rand, they said it's too expensive. It's going to lead to undercutting budgets for health, undercutting budgets for education. That's what the court said. Guess what? The cost of IPPs has crossed the 1 trillion mark. Not according to me, according to the Just Energy Implementation Plan for 2023 to 2027, presented by the president. Did you get that? The cost of IPPs is now officially more than the cost of nuclear, which was rejected by the Western Cape High Court. And do you want to know what it is? 1.48 trillion rands. That's the cost. Not according to me, according to the President of South Africa in the Just Energy Implementation Plan for 2023 to 2027. And I'm going to put it up here so you can see it yourself. Some journalists have actually raised the question of whether the decision to lobby against nuclear power in 2016 and 2017 was a political decision. A decision to prevent the shift to nuclear would have allowed for IPPs to come in. Here's the question, and here's an answer that was given by the energy expert.
It was not affordable 5 years ago, 6 years ago. It's affordable now. One says this brings the question to whether the rejection of nuclear at the time was more political than it was about the economics.
Yeah. Good morning, Thabo, and good morning to the viewers. The fact is, it's always been affordable. Okay. The rejection, as you correctly point out, was political. At the time, the people and the organizations that were opposed to nuclear basically lied, and they spread propaganda saying that the nuclear program was going to cost 1 trillion rand. Okay. And that was to procure 9,600 megawatts of power. I did, and many of us did the calculations at the time. It was not going to cost us more than 540 billion rand, even with cost escalation. Yeah. Okay. So it has always been affordable. And right now they're talking about the cost of implementing the renewables program, and figures of about 1.5 trillion rand have been bandied about, and nobody says it's too expensive for some. So this is all about politics and not about the real issues and the real costs, and taking into account the interests of South Africa.
What do you think? What do you think? Do you think that people have been played? That the decision to block and fight nuclear was one that was simply designed to allow for IPPs to come in, to allow for the energy exchange of South Africa to distribute energy, to allow for particular billionaires, because the energy exchange for South Africa is linked to Mr. Rupert. The IPPs, a large share of them have been won in bid window 6 by Patrice Motsepe and the African Renewable Energy and Minerals and Energy Group. Glencore also owns some IPPs. If you recall, Mr. Ramaphosa used to be on that board there at Glencore, company that has been accused of bribing African politicians in 7 countries, manipulating the prices of commodities. They paid fines. Glencore paid fines in the US and the UK, fines of billions of dollars and pounds because of their illegal, unlawful criminal conduct in Africa. But they never paid a fine in Africa. Committed crimes in Africa, never paid a fine in Africa. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? What do you think? What do you think about this new nuclear deal? Who do you think is going to build and operate it? Who do you think is going to... So what was it all about? What is it all about? We were told that certain individuals were coming to capture the state. They are going to capture the state. Captures the Guptas, the Zumas, the so-and-sos, the so-and-sos. Hey! There's this term that is used in psychology. It's called gaslighting. Gaslighting. That's not when you're feeling cold and you switch on the gas. No. It's not about winter. It's about what is done by abusive and manipulative people to people around them to make them believe that they are the problem when they've been the problem all along, to accuse others of doing the very thing that those people are doing. Gaslighting. It's not about lighting your gas, that thing. It's a serious form of traumatic abuse. Now the question is, if you can gaslight someone in a house, in a relationship, can you gaslight a country? Can you gaslight a country? What do you think? What do you think about this new nuclear deal? Let's have a conversation in the comments. Till the next one. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe. It helps YouTube know that you love this content. It helps others to find this content on the platform. Till the next one.